Hello there, my name is Karen Loeb and I'm a second year medical student who's going to present today some information about blood pressure. My disclosures for this presentation is that most of the content will come from the Centers for Disease Control. I will have links to these resources available at the end of the presentation. So to start off, what is blood pressure? Blood pressure is the force that blood puts on the arteries as it spreads throughout the body. So here you can see this blood vessel, and this arrow here is representing blood moving throughout the body. As blood moves throughout the body, it puts a force or pressure against the wall here, which is represented by this arrow. So I'm assuming that many of you have had your blood pressure taken and have been given a number for your blood pressure. So I want to discuss what those numbers are very quickly. So low blood pressure is when your blood pressure is at or below 90/60, though there are no exact numbers that are agreed upon for low blood pressure. A normal blood pressure is at or below 120/80. An elevated blood pressure is 120 to 129/80, and a high blood pressure is at or above 130/80. So what exactly are these two numbers? The top number represents the systolic blood pressure, and that's just a fancy way of saying the blood pressure when your heart beats. So when your heart beats, the heart muscle contracts and it pumps blood throughout your body. The bottom number is representing the diastolic blood pressure, which is a fancy way of saying the blood pressure when your heart is at rest. So this number is always going to be lower than the top number. So some symptoms and signs for low blood pressure include dizziness or lightheadedness, nausea, fainting, dehydration, difficulty focusing, blurry vision, cold, clammy, or pale skin, rapid, short breaths, tiredness, or depression. There are certain conditions that can cause low blood pressure, and those include pregnancy, an allergic reaction to something will lower your blood pressure, and it can also be caused by not having enough nutrients in your diet. There are also certain medications that have side effects of low blood pressure, and a pharmacist or your provider should notify you of those. Now, high blood pressure, in contrast to low blood pressure, usually doesn't present with any symptoms or warning signs. The main way that you know you have high blood pressure is by measuring it to see if your blood pressure is too high. Some people may have symptoms that include headaches, shortness of breath, or nosebleeds, but the majority don't. So why are we talking about blood pressure today? In particular, high blood pressure is very common among the Latino community. Almost 28% of Hispanic adults have high blood pressure, but only 45% of those have their high blood pressure controlled. And this is really significant because there are many ways to prevent getting high blood pressure in the first place. And there are many things you can do to control high blood pressure, from medications to lifestyle changes. And we'll talk about those later. I also want to add at this point that there's a connection between high blood pressure and diabetes. And here's that connection. Diabetes causes the kidneys, which is one of the organs in the body, to become less efficient at filtering blood. And diabetes also causes blood vessels to get stiff, which means that they can't get large and then small again. And with high blood pressure, stiff arteries will lead to high blood pressure. And this is sort of an endless cycle where when you have high blood pressure, the vessels in your kidney may continue to stiffen, and that's going to then make your blood pressure even higher. So that's an important point to keep in mind moving forward, because high blood pressure and diabetes are both very common and they can make each other worse. So can high blood pressure be prevented? Absolutely. And here are a few tips, and we'll go into more of these in detail in a little bit. One is to get your blood pressure checked regularly. Like I mentioned earlier, you can't know if you have high blood pressure unless you measure it most of the time. 2 is to eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy weight, exercise, limit drinking, don't smoke or try to quit smoking, and prevent or manage diabetes. Because as I just mentioned on the last slide, there's a connection between diabetes and high blood pressure, where if diabetes is not controlled, it can worsen high blood pressure. So why is it important to control your blood pressure? There are 3 main reasons. The first is to prevent heart attacks and heart disease. So high blood pressure will make it harder for your arteries, the vessels in your body, to get blood, oxygen, and nutrients to all the places it needs to go. The second reason is to prevent issues with your brain. High blood pressure will make it harder for your brain to get those same blood, oxygen, and nutrients that it needs to function. And if an artery breaks or is blocked, the brain won't get oxygen, and all the cells in your brain will die. When these cells die, it can make it harder for you to do certain things. For example, it can be harder to talk, move, or do other basic activities that are important for your day-to-day life. And 3, controlling your blood pressure is important for preventing kidney disease. High blood pressure can make it harder for the kidneys to remove waste and extra fluid because those arteries, partially because those arteries are stiff. And this can make the blood pressure get even higher. So one way to treat high blood pressure is to take certain medications. And blood pressure medications work in a few different ways. 1, they can help get rid of extra water in your body. If there's less fluid in your body, that's going to put less pressure on your arteries. And when your arteries don't have as much pressure, that'll lower your overall blood pressure. Blood pressure medications can also relax your blood vessels, and they can make your heart beat with less force. If your heartbeat isn't as strong, less blood will get pumped from your heart to your body, and this will make sure that the pressure in your vessels doesn't get too high. And another way they work is to prevent your arteries from getting too narrow. In our body, we have certain chemicals that will tell our arteries to get small. But when our arteries get small, that will make blood pressure higher. So there are medications that help prevent our vessels from getting too narrow to keep blood pressure under control. And here's a list of some common blood pressure medications. You definitely don't need to memorize these, but I wanted to put some of the most commonly prescribed blood pressure medications on this slide, and I've color-coded them based on how they work. So for example, hydrochlorothiazide or HCTZ and furosemide, which is also known as latex, both work in the same way because I colored them both red here. And same goes for some of the other medications that will share the same color on the slide. And if you have questions about blood pressure medications, always ask your provider. And if you don't have a primary care provider, I've put some clinics here that you can contact if you're looking for someone. Another way to help treat high blood pressure is lifestyle related, and that deals with diet and exercise. There's some foods that can make your blood pressure high and damage your arteries. Also, overweight and obesity increase your risk of developing high blood pressure. So exercising can help you stay at a healthy weight. So how much exercise should you be getting? For adults, it's 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per day. And that can include fast walking, biking, running, dancing, or any other form of exercise. For kids, it's 1 hour of physical activity per day. And this slide talks about a heart-healthy diet and focuses on certain foods that are really good for your heart and others that may not help your heart. So one is to eat more vegetables and fruits because they have vitamins, minerals, and fibers that help keep us healthy. 2 is to limit unhealthy fats. Saturated and trans fats can damage your arteries and lead to heart disease. And here's how that works. Saturated and trans fats will increase your cholesterol. Some types of cholesterol are good and other types of cholesterol are bad. If there's too much cholesterol, that cholesterol will get inside your arteries because it doesn't have anywhere else to go. And when it does that, it damages them. And because the cholesterol is building up in your arteries, it will narrow the space that blood has to travel. And that can contribute to high blood pressure because, as we talked about before, when vessels get too narrow, it increases the pressure that the blood puts on your vessels. Another tip to keep in mind is to reduce the amount of salt in your diet. Salt can lead to high blood pressure. And finally, choosing low-fat proteins, things like yogurt, eggs, legumes, and soybeans, and trying to limit some of those higher fat items like bacon or hot dogs. And this link here is to the DASH eating plan. And this is one guide for a heart-healthy diet that has helped others lower their blood pressure. So if you're interested, these slides will be provided to you and you can click on this link. And on the topic of food, I know that it can sometimes be hard to get healthy food. So I've listed here some different food pantries that you can go to if you are looking for food. Another lifestyle related change that's important for controlling high blood pressure is to limit smoking and drinking. Smoking can raise your blood pressure and increase your risk for heart attacks and strokes. And a stroke is when an artery to your brain gets blocked or damaged, and then your brain is not able to get enough oxygen and the cells die. And as those cells die, it can make it hard for you to do some of your day-to-day functions, depending on what part of your brain the stroke impacts. Alcohol can also raise your blood pressure, so limiting drinking is another way to control high blood pressure. For women, it's recommended to have no more than 1 alcoholic beverage per day. And for men, it is recommended to have no more than 2 alcoholic beverages per day. If you have questions about quitting smoking or cutting back on drinking, ask your provider. And again, I've put a list of a few different community health centers that you can access if you don't have a primary care provider. Another important thing to do is to monitor your health. The doctors and providers can tell you about ways to make your blood pressure lower, but the best thing that you can do is to keep track of it yourself. So there are a few ways to do that. One is to get a blood pressure cuff to monitor your blood pressure. And there are instructions on this video here. And again, you'll be provided with the slides and can go to that link. When you take your blood pressure, it's important to write those numbers down in a journal. And then you can bring that with you to your provider for your next visit. This will help the provider know, for example, if you're taking a medication, how well that medication is working. Or if you're making lifestyle changes, it can help track how well those changes are going with respect to decreasing your blood pressure. There are also apps on your phone that can help track things like exercise and diet. For example, MyFitnessPal is an app available for iPhones and Androids. And Progreso Latino offers weight and blood pressure checks. So if you are interested in that, the contact information is right here. So here are the key points that I'd like you to take away from this presentation. The first one is that a blood pressure of 130/80 or above is considered to be high. The second point is that uncontrolled high blood pressure can damage different parts of your body, including your heart, brain, and kidneys. The third point is that there are different ways to treat high blood pressure: medications and lifestyle changes. And ideally, the two together will have an even more positive impact. The fourth point is that living a healthy lifestyle may help lower your blood pressure. So making sure that you're exercising or making changes to your diet so that it's healthy for your heart, those can go a long way. The fifth point is that high blood pressure is very common among the Latino community, but less than half have their blood pressure under control. And in this presentation, we've talked about some ways to control your blood pressure, and these will help improve your overall health and well-being. The sixth point is that monitoring your blood pressure at home will help you and your provider figure out the best way to treat it. And lastly, ask your provider any questions you have about your health. No question is ever too silly, and it is really important to advocate for what you need and make sure you have all the information that you want so that you can be as healthy as you can be. And this slide just has some questions about how you should take blood pressure. And here are those links to some more information for topics that you may want to read more about outside of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.